Yes, hello everybody, and welcome along to another edition of what we call Full Course Yellow. If you're joining us here from Channel 31 and in Pit Lane, well, we welcome you and thank you for watching the program. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show with our special guest Richard Crail talking about the Tasman Series. We might talk a bit about that a little bit later on in the show as well. But this is called Full Course Yellow. If you've not seen this before, well, where have you been? This is just basically a bit of an after show get together where a few of us sort of, join together every week during these very difficult times of lockdown and semi-lockdown and whatever it is we're in at the moment, and just basically have a chat. And joining me on to have a chat tonight, you can see we've got a few of the regulars here. Chris is joining us. Richard is also with us, and of course
Yep.
Pete as well. So guys, welcome to. Welcome and thank you to everyone who is joining us at home as well. So if you are watching and you want to make a comment or if you want to ask a question, please do so. Just go into the chat section on YouTube or here on the Facebook page and leave your comments and your questions there, and we'll get around to them as soon as we possibly can. But well, right now, not a lot happened, as I said on the show tonight. Not a lot has happened locally in motorsport for the last couple of weeks. We know that what's one thing that isn't going to happen, at least not on the same weekend that it was planned, is now been there's now been announced that the Bathurst 1000 will be delayed. It will be postponed. Date yet to be fixed. They're talking sometime in November. Yeah, g'day Tony, how are you? Good to see you back again. So Tony's with us again, and also yeah, Shanks Motorsport. Yeah, Bathurst, as we said, Bathurst has been delayed, and interesting. I mean, I imagine that Lindsay and Andrew Fox would be absolutely delighted because it looks like they're coming back after Supercars said thanks but no thanks to Phillip Island, as they did to Sandown. They've now said, hey, can we come back? We'd like to come back, please. So there will be a round happening later in the year at Phillip Island. Haven't seen a date for that yet. I know it's a fairly tight calendar for Phillip Island, so I'm not sure where they're going to squeeze that in. And I hope that whatever they're planning doesn't affect things like some of those Victorian state rounds or things like Island Magic and those sorts of things. So, but anyway, we'll find out that a little bit later. G'day, Mark. How are you? Good to see you back again once again. But as we said, yeah, Bathurst delayed and. Yeah, Bathurst delayed is Bathurst denied, I suppose. We'll find out. We do know that the Bathurst International is happening. Richard, what what did Bathurst the Challenge Bathurst last year? What date is that on? You're hang on a second.
Yep.
There we go. I've got it.
Uh,
There you go.
okay. Last year it was run, I think, late November, early December, I think, and but this year it's meant to be running early November. Well, that's going to be a pretty full calendar for the track at Bathurst if the actual race is pushed back.
Because they've also got the Bathurst International, and
Yep.
they've announced today, or just recently as well, that the Bathurst International, the TCR round, which was going to be the original plans were for it to be an endurance race with multiple with co-drivers and hopefully international competitors coming from Europe and Asia to take part, is now going to be just a round of the regular series, a points paying round. It's going to be called the Bathurst 400. It's going to run over three individual races over the course of the weekend. So that's from the Bathurst International, which I think is coming in November as well. Yeah, so things have changed there. Paul saying Whitton Festival of Speed still on for the 6th of 8th of August. Now, there's been some confusion. I got a message today saying that spectators would not be able to attend, but he's saying, but I've also seen pre-purchase tickets available by the Victorian Historic Racing Register website. So it'd be a shame if that was cancelled as well, but that's at the moment that is still going ahead. And but of course we probably won't have anybody down from New South Wales to take part. But I've seen the entry list for that. The entry list is really good. A lot of those if you watched at the start of the year our trip over to my trip over to Malala for the historic Malala with all of the sports sedans, those historic sports sedans, a lot of those cars, most of them, and a few others as well, have entered for that weekend. But of course, some of them are coming from New South Wales and Queensland, so that might be a bit of a problem there. So that's a bit of a shame.
I'm just going to say, Brett, all the calendars are going to be are like 52 pickup at the moment. Last weekend's Sandown is gone. There was meant to be a club style event for Hyundai's in 3 weeks' time, and that's not appeared in the entry lists. And if the Sandown round is moved into August and other things move into August, it's going to be pretty tight.
Yeah, I believe the Sandown state round. They're looking at the end of August to stage that now, and the Sports Sedan Association, Victorian Sports Sedan or Australian Sports Sedan Association Victoria have been putting out stuff in social media, asking all the categories whether they're happy about that, whether they can still get decent fields, because obviously it costs a lot of money to hire Sandown. And they don't want to be doing it if they get short field. The problem is nobody can plan anything. I mean, we're in the same boat. I mean, in terms of I got the news today. I mean, as some of you guys would know, that we're back in the studio on Tuesday night at this stage now, so we've got to sort of pull that together really quickly, get guests in, because guests were cancelled, bands were cancelled, a whole bunch of things, and we've lost some crew because they just said, look, we can't plan anything. We changed our work schedules so we could get in on Tuesday night and work on the show. And then when the show was cancelled, we went back to Tuesday nights, and it's an absolute nightmare. As Michael's saying, ripped up the calendar 3 times this year. Only 3 times. I mean, we've done that in a week. I mean, it's just. It's crazy, but until everything sort of settles down, and the scary thing is, I mean, I heard a thing tonight from someone in the government who was saying that at the rate things are going, we're probably going to be seeing that this go well into next year as well, and that's going to be a pain.
The word is about the Phillip Island return to Supercars is it's going to be on the weekend that the MotoGP was going to be on. And they're going to do it like a 2-up thing, like a double-header thing with the superbikes, as they did in Darwin.
Oh, okay, yep. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, it's a real good idea, because that will get a crowd then, because, one of the things they've had, one of the reasons they wanted to sort of, the supercars weren't keen on keeping at Phillip Island was the fact that they never really got a big crowd down there. The superbikes will draw a crowd whenever there's, whenever the superbikes, even at the state level, they get a good crowd, they get a good turnout down there for the bikes at the island. So that'd really make a difference to the crowd and make it worthwhile. I mean, I'd be more likely. I mean, I'm not going to get accredited or anything like that. I'd have to pay some money if I wanted to go, but I'd be much more likely to go down if the bikes are running as well.
The Hyundais could be a support race. We could pay $3,000 an entry.
Yes.
Ouch.
But you'd have Foxtel, and it'd pay for itself with all of your sponsors, Richard.
Yes, and we might get half a dozen laps if for the red flag coming out.
Like
they did at Bathurst. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I mean, with categories, with support categories, I mean, you are playing very definitely second fiddle to the supercars, which makes sense. I mean, the television money is for the supercars. The television has very tight schedules, and when they want the race to start at 3 o'clock, and more particularly finish at 4:54 or whatever time they want it to finish, that's the time that it's got to finish. So so everything else sort of gets pushed aside, and very frustrating for all of because I mean, you guys, the support categories pay their money as well. They take it. It's every bit as serious to them as it is to the supercar guys, and people are coming from all over Australia. And it happened with the sports dance one. There was years ago.
Yeah.
there was a round of the national sports sedans out at Sandown along with the supercars, and I think over the whole course of the weekend they got about 6 laps.
Well, that's what happened at the 6 hour. They turned up at I think at Sparrow's Fart, and I think they crashed on the start line. Boom, red flag, end of session. Then they got the race 2. They got in 2 or 3 laps, and then hello, Dave. And then I think they got 4 or 5 laps on the next one. So it was a long way to come for not a lot of racing.
Dave is joining us while he's eating. Let's get a review. Let's get a food review from Dave. Dave, what are we eating, and how tasty is it?
So our first course tonight are some steamed dim sims from
Very
a
nice.
local dumpling house. These are going down quite nicely. I will let you know how the next course works out, which will be some chicken Sancho bao.
Oh, very nice. Very nice indeed. There we are. So we're finding out. So you get everything on Full Course Yellow. You get your news and discussion on Motoroid, but you also get valuable food guides as well.
Yeah, it's 4 or 5 course yellow.
Yes.
Where from, Dave? Give them a plug.
I'll reserve the plugs until I've gone through all my 5 courses. It's a local supplier of Chinese food I've not yet used. So I want to say thank you to my Uber Eats driver, Sakir. He was great. And I gave him a little tip on the way through as well. So thank you to all of the people who look after the last mile delivery services, particularly to those people that are looking after the millions of people locked down in Sydney, who definitely need the shout out and the love right now.
Yeah.
Yes. So that they're doing it tough in Sydney, and very frustrating. I mean, when you look at those figures every day, and it's like, they're not only are they not coming down, they're going the other way. I mean, it must be that there's
if only there was another Australian jurisdiction that had dealt with an outbreak that size in the last 12 to 18 months that they could learn some lessons from.
Yeah.
But it's not like that ever happened.
No. I mean, this is virgin territory. I mean, in terms of that, we've never seen anything. This is unprecedented, I believe. I think that's what Gladys said today. Unprecedented.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except for one other place. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's not go. But anyway, that's the frustration. The frustration is that this is going to continue. So coming up this week, though, we do have some stuff on our television screens again, because Formula One will be back in action again, and it'll be interesting. As we said last week, it would be really, really good to have to have some live coverage of the drivers' briefing. I mean, Pete? How do you think that? I mean, if you're Max Verstappen, what do you say when you sort of run face to face into Lewis Hamilton?
I to be honest, I think it'll be a bit of a non-event. I think it'll just go on as normal. It'll be interesting to see if Max is as competitive, because he's apparently still bruised. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects him. But I think it'll just go on as normal, and they'll just let Toto and Christian fight it out amongst themselves.
Yeah, well, Red Bull have got an appeal going tonight, actually, sort of, like pretty much probably happening now, our time, where they say they're going to introduce, new evidence, so we will see what that evidence is, and whether it makes any change. Or I like the comments from Gunther Stein. What is us? From sort of saying that if it's a 10-second penalty for taking an opponent out, there's only 19 cars, so 100. As long as you get, it's probably worth losing 190 seconds in the end. It's the only way they're going to win. Let's face it.
But I think it's a storm in a teacup, but then again, I don't have $100 million race team. But I wouldn't have been if I saw that footage. That was me. I wouldn't have paid any protest to the stewards.
No, I think as we said last week, I think I'd certainly put it down to a racing incident, but anyway, it'll be interesting. But I mean, it's really sort of pumped up the racing for the weekend. I mean, they're sort of they're promoting it as if it's like sort of Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania. I mean, it's like
Nicky Lauda versus James Hunt.
Or I mean, sort of
Cross versus Senna.
Controversy equals cash, and they're delighted about that. I mean, Dave, you weren't with us. What was your take on the great crash?
You're talking about the racing incident?
Yes, the racing incident. Yes.
So it was interesting. What I found critical out of the coverage that came out of it was that Michael Massey made it very clear that the understanding that the stewards and race control and basically the sport as a whole, including the teams, has signed up to, is that you award a penalty for the incident, not the outcome. So wind out everything about how fast the car disappeared off the track and how Max had to go to hospital, and then he was, the allegations that Lewis was celebrating on the podium when he, didn't know that Max was still in hospital. Take all that crap out. Focus on the incident. What is it? It's two drivers on the first lap of a big Grand Prix in two cars that are very closely matched in speed. Lewis had a run, stuck it up the inside, half backed out of it. He was going to miss the apex by a meter, 2 meters. If he'd have backed off just a tiny bit more, a little bit earlier, he maybe could have kept narrow, but Max had the wider line. Max could have given a little bit more room on the inside. And all it was a very minor touch between, wheel and wheel or wheel and wing. Now, the outcome was, car spearing off into the barriers at 170 odd mile an hour and Max going to hospital, courtesy of the, FIA medical check. But the actual incident itself, like we've seen first lap incidents like that over and over and over again. Not the first one, not the last one we're going to see, and certainly not the last time these two drivers are going to tangle with each other. I'd say if it was certainly a much more deliberate move, then the FIA stewards would have issued a much more stringent penalty. But the thing I most liked out of the experience was listening to the FIA radio. That is an absolute gem in the F1 broadcasting regime of 2021. To listen to, Christian and Toto going backwards and forwards with Michael Massey. And Michael, I'm pretty 99.9% sure you're not watching because, it's the wrong time in Europe. But keep up everything you're doing, mate. It is absolutely excellent. He just it's like, Toto, I don't read my emails while I'm, it's like, no, I'm focusing on my job. I'm not, I've got, a 10% discount voucher for Uber Eats, in my inbox. It's like, no, I'm running, the pinnacle of world motorsport for the, 2 hours in a 4-hour window on a Sunday afternoon in Britain. I'm not listening to an email. It's like, if you've got something to say it. And if it had weight, then something will come out of it. Nothing's going to come out of the hearing. It'll be fine. It's like, suck it up, move on.
Yeah, as we said last week, I mean, full credit to the FIA and Michael Massey for putting out for letting that stuff go out there. As we said last week, I mean, it's not going live. I mean, it is sort of filtered. I mean, Doc was sort of saying that this is somebody will say the wrong thing, but we're not getting it live. It is going through a filter. I mean, they are sort of we're getting limited amounts of it, but enough to make it interesting.
Yeah, they're getting the snippets. Yeah.
And
the thing that's interesting now is that now the teams know that their broadcasts to the FIA are going out or have the potential to go out on broadcast. Apparently, there's been a lot less chatter on the radio to Michael Massey. Who knew?
And the time that it did, someone did say something wrong was Sebastian Vettel telling Charlie Whiting to go and do something. And and he got fined heavily for it. So if it does slip out, they do get fined for it. So yeah, it has happened.
It certainly added another layer of interest to the weekend, and I imagine sort of the ratings for this weekend around the world are going to be considered, particularly in England and the Netherlands, of course. I mean, they'll be at each other's throat, and they'll be sort of looking on, and and we'll certainly be looking on and waiting to see. But I think that's interesting what you were saying, Pete. That Max has put in sort of a big session in the simulator, and says he's fit to race, but he has admitted that he's pretty badly banged up and bruised. And that probably won't have any effect early in the race or in qualifying or anything like that. But perhaps like in a long race, if the conditions are it might start to have an effect sort of later on in the course of the race that could come back to bite him a bit, because it was a big whack. I mean, it was a huge testimony to the strength of the cars and the safety features of the track and everything that he's still with us, because like years ago that would have been a very, very serious accident in terms of the result for the driver.
Yeah.
Imagine
and then it starts that conversation again about how much safety barrier you have around the circuits. Like, they have obviously quite a number of the FIA interlinked tyre barriers around the circuit with the conveyor belt fencing on it. And obviously there is some safer barrier a little bit further back around the corner. But he managed to hit where there wasn't the safer barrier. So unfortunately you can't, put the highest level safety measures everywhere around the circuit. And unfortunately, I'm fairly certain that the next time we go back to Silverstone, there'll probably be some changes to the safety barriers in that corner.
Yeah, you would imagine so. They'll take a look at all that sort of stuff again. And that's the one thing. I mean, whenever somebody goes off anywhere in that sort of and makes contact with the wall, that there will be a full investigation afterwards, and they will have a look at it and say, well, would it hurt if we put an extra row of tyres in, and we brought that sort of tech barrier, that's a safer barrier, a bit forward, and put a bit more there as well. That would be good. But also this weekend we got the Spa 24 Hour is running. Number of Australians are running this weekend. So I'm assuming that there will be some live streaming on GT World. So that'll give us something to watch over the weekend as well. So there's a few things happening over the course of the weekend, which will be.
One of the things that won't be happening, Brett, is the Victorian 6-hour relay.
Yes. Well, that was something I said a few weeks ago to the guys. Look, would like to come down and do some story. This is the problem we got doing a weekly motorsport show at the moment. In terms of local motorsport, there's absolutely nothing for us to go out and point our cameras in. I mean, the state round was killed off. The 6 hours been killed off. Winton Historic is a bit uncertain at the moment. So yeah, it's I suppose the only bright side is it's actually saving us money. We got no sponsors at the moment, and no budget. So at least it's cheap to stay at home on the weekends rather than trek all over the state looking for race cars to point cameras at.
Well, the good news about the fourth round of the Victorian State Circuit Racing Championships promoted by the Australian Sporting Sedan Association of Victoria has preliminarily been rescheduled to the last weekend in August, which I believe is the 27th through the 29th. There or thereabouts. As I believe the Phillip Island 6-hour relay has been kind of put into that kind of space as well. It's still up in the air about the PIARC August access meeting, which is due to come up next weekend. But as we know, with the restrictions, it becomes a moving target. It's not that you can't go and do the activity. It's that you can't have a bunch of people from different households in one accommodation mixing with each other, which becomes the problem on Phillip Island.
Yeah.
I'm entered for that one, so we'll see what happens there.
What are you having a play with at August Access, Richard?
Tin tops. It's really
okay.
it's
It's a good old butcher's picnic race.
yes, it's like a accelerated private practice, you might say, because there's a few Hyundais going down there, and I can judge myself against some of the better drivers, which is probably I'll get out my binoculars and to see where they've gone.
I know you'll get to see them up nice and close and personal as they lap
you. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Love you, mate. Love your work.
We also saw online the new engines for the supercars are being tested at the moment. What do we think of that? The first one that we've heard from is the Chev engine, the Chev based engine, which is running around in a TA2 car, a Mercedes TA2 car, which they've obviously got from the Asian series, because they run them in Thailand, and I'd like to see a few more of those out here as well. They run a few extra body styles in the TA2 series in Thailand, so it would be good to see.
In Thailand, don't they run? They're on a 5-speed sequential, and I think either ABS and or traction control, because it's very much more a gentleman racer, and they don't have the decades of chest beating, homoerotic masculinity of muscle cars.
Tribalism.
I'll put my hand and say, I say this as the owner of a 600 horsepower Mustang with a live axle. So, Daddy Shark.
Yeah, it was.
But yes, late model engines sound great. Who knew?
Yeah. That was one of the things of both the Volvo and the Nissan. I mean, that they had that different thing. Although I have heard people complaining about, they don't sound like the 5-litre, the good old fashioned 5-litre push rod. I mean, let's bring them back. But it'll be interesting. We pretty much know how the sort of the Mustang is, or the Coyote based engine is going to sound, because we'll hear them in S5000s. And as we saw on the program tonight, the big news there was the return of the Tasman Series. And as we said, unfortunately, no races in New Zealand, but also, as we said, that's going to come. And the fact that
no races in New Zealand
this year, but for this season, but certainly it's on the card. The fact that both Motorsport Australia and Motorsport New Zealand have got together and signed off on that is a really good sign, because I was surprised in a way. I thought New Zealand might have sort of fought back against it a little bit, might have kicked back, because they've already got that really successful series over there for the Toyota Racing Series. But as Richard Crail said on the show tonight, they are sort of two totally separate sort of driver markets as well. I mean, obviously the Toyota Racing Series, a lot of very keen, very young drivers, particularly from Europe, coming in and trying to make a name for themselves and get a bit of sort of off-season practice for the European season ahead. Whereas you would expect the S5000s to be driven mainly by slightly older drivers, or drivers who are basically concentrating on the Australian series. I think what do you think about the idea of having it? Because the original idea, I believe, talking to Chris Lambden over the years, was for it to be like, the whole thing would be a summer series with races in New Zealand, and the whole thing. Now it looks like they've made the decision to separate them completely. It'll be like the old days. We'll have a Tasman Series in sort of December, January, February, whatever the time frame is. And then we'll have a totally separate Gold Star Series as well in the Australian winter. Is that going to work? I mean, is it going to be spreading themselves too thin?
Well, we used to do that with touring cars. We had the regular Australian Touring Car Championship that was one and done by sort of August. And then we had the endurance races at Sandown and Bathurst.
Yeah, and going back even further, I mean, it was the Manufacturers' Championship. You had Sandown, you had Bathurst, you had an Oran Park 250, I think. You had Phillip Island had a 400k race. back in the day, Surfers Paradise, when the old Surfers Paradise circuit, it had an endurance race as well, and I enjoyed that. I mean, because you had two very different race series over the years. It wasn't just the same one going on and on and on. I mean, you had your sprint races for the Australian Touring Car Championship, and then you had long distance races. Had long distance races for the manufacturers championship, of course, which Bathurst was. Yeah, it was a big pile of it.
There's only one problem. The audience now has a attention span not in hours but in seconds.
Sorry, what?
And there's so many things to choose from now. Like, what are you going to put in your mouth this time? Eh?
So have we moved? So Dave, have we moved on to the Sanchoy Bao yet? I mean, or are we still on the dumplings?
No. I had the Sanchoy Bao. I managed to sneak that in while in between praising Michael Massey and blowing off the whole turn cops. Now we're into the steamed pork dumplings with a spicy Szechuan sauce. But I will admit, I'll use this to speak to the thousands upon thousands of people out there around Melbourne and across Australia and around the world. What I'd really like to find with regards to Chinese food is I did used to have a little Chinese place around the corner from me that did a dish called General Tso's or General Chow's chicken. In Chinese, in Chinese it's Zuo Zongtangji, which means General Tso's chicken. It's very much an American dish. It's not traditional Chinese food, but I loved it. And now that I can't get it, I am devastated. And I'm searching desperately for some sort of Chinese restaurant in Melbourne that will satisfy my craving for, manufactured Western taste Chinese cuisine.
I can point you at a couple of places at Springvale that do a good General Tso's chicken. I mean, I knock up a pretty good one myself, actually. But It's, as you say, it's not. It's like so many of those things. It's like Mongolian beef, which has absolutely nothing at all to do with Mongolia. But
they have cows in Mongolia. No, they've got yaks.
They've got cows everywhere.
They've got sheep. I tell you what. Well, when we were on Mongolia, I mean, we had lamb. They got lots and lots of lamb. The lamb was very nice, but we also had pig's ears, we had sheep's eyes, and we also had a serving of horse as well. So
that's not a very nice way to talk about your dinner guests.
Yes. The bizarre thing was I was the only Westerner there, and all of the Asian people who were from places like the Philippines and Singapore and Hong Kong, they were all looking at this food and going, "Oh, I don't know whether we'll touch that." And I was just hopping in there. They were all sort of looking at me and going, "Yeah, okay. If you don't die,
we'll prize you off the loo tomorrow morning."
So the reaction that a lot of Asian people have to, obviously non-Asian Australians have to, seeing Australian Chinese or Asian food is kind of like the reaction that we all get when we walk into an Outback Steakhouse in the US.
Yeah.
How many of you are, in the middle of the American West going, "Oh, I've got a craving for a bloomin' onion."
Bloomin' onion, yes. Someone, I didn't know what it was for a while. Some American guy.
I'll wash it down with a stubby of Foster's.
Yes. Yeah, the bloomin' onion. If you don't know what a bloomin' onion is, you do a search for Outback Steakhouse bloomin' onion. This is apparently an Australian delicacy. We eat little else, apparently. Just have a look at what a bloomin' onion is, and you thank God. Anybody the Mandalika racetrack at Lombok, Russell's been there. Anybody seen anything about that? Haven't seen
I've
any
been to
details
Lombok,
of that.
but I didn't see any racetrack.
Well, there's apparently one there, there's going to be one there. So that's interesting. There's a few tracks
Oh, that's
There?
the circuit that's being built near Bali. That's got on the island of Lombok. It's in it's a kind of a bit like the Sochi circuit. It's like a purpose-built racing circuit that's also partially a street circuit. I believe it's going to be a MotoGP race in the future.
Oh, okay.
Like,
Okay,
where
yeah.
did they find the land to build a racetrack on? It's occupied by someone in every square inch on Lombok.
I'd observed that the governments in that particular part of the Asian subcontinent might not have such a robust community engagement protocol.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. It's up.
Yes. Yes.
Move out of the way of the bulldozer, or
Yes.
Yes.
I believe it was a similar experience was had by the residents of quite a number of neighbourhoods in Hanoi.
Yes.
Who were quite annoyed when they got told that their house would have to make way for a Formula One circuit, which now doesn't appear to be going ahead.
And was never ever used. Yes, so but anyway, it would look lovely, but yeah. So there's,
let's get back on script, Brett. What's next on the call sheet?
Call sheet.
There's a call sheet.
Yeah, that's it.
What?
What's next on the call sheet?
That's the next thing we've got to make.
That is the next thing. Well, we don't have Doc along for the MotoGP.
Yes, I know, and I'm terribly disappointed that he's not here. I took all this time to find an outfit to be pretty enough to compare with Doc, and he's not here.
He's not here. Doc is I think sleeping at the moment. He's running all over the place for work at the moment. But Cal Cutchlow,
unusual hours of the morning.
Oh,
Yeah,
I do
very
like that comment by Box.
Yeah, well, I think that was sort of the
Tasman
original
Series at
plan.
Albert Park.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, but the F1 people and the V8 supercar people are never going to let their egos simply will not allow that good of a show.
Yeah, I think they
You don't
will.
think
I
that
mean,
can
yeah,
have
they
viewers entertained more than they do.
They're going to run the S5000s, or in fact they did run the S5000s, last year for the S5000s. Certainly practiced. They didn't get to qualify or race, but they were certainly practicing. We had Rubens Barrichello out again, and a couple of we had Jordan, whose last name I forget now, but young Jordan from New Zealand, who was a guest on the show. He came out and was running there. So I imagine that they will. I think that would be the long-term plan, depending on when we're going to have the Grand Prix. I mean, because they're talking about April now. So do we think April
going
is
back
a good?
to being the second or third round of the series.
Yeah, which has always been on the cards, because I know that sort of Formula One management and the television networks, particularly in Europe, have not been keen on the first round being in Australia simply because of the time zone situation, but they're going to have to move it early if they're going to run it sort of later in the year. They're going to have to sort of even if it's only in sort of early to mid-April, they're going to have to probably bring the time back a bit, because it'll be dark by if they run it at the time they're running it now, it'll be pitch black by the time it gets to about 6:30, 7 o'clock.
Yeah, it was getting pretty dark the last time.
Yeah, but
by in mid-April, won't it already be like an hour earlier, because it'll be daylight savings will be turned off?
well, they sort of stretched out daylight saving, didn't they, to sort of take in the Grand Prix? And whether they, I mean, I doubt whether they'd stretch it anymore. I don't think because I know the other states were particularly unimpressed when the decision was sort of made, and some of them went along with it to save any confusion. But I don't think they'd pushed for another extension into further into April, and the weather's getting a bit sort of chilly. A bit unpredictable, more unpredictable at that time of year as well. So.
It's not like we want unpredictable,
kind of a bonus
unpredictable weather for a Formula One race.
Yeah, well, it might make it entertaining.
That kind of makes the racing more fun.
Yeah, that's it. It might make the racing.
You can use a water tanker.
entertaining.
Just use a water tanker.
Yeah, I think that.
Bernie's
only
going to
one
seem
part
less
of
and
the
less
track.
crazy every time we have a wet race.
Yep. Yeah, Bernie Bernie's idea, I don't think was a bad one. Also coming out now, that's interesting. Looking at the ticker on the bottom, Tony Quinn's not having a good run in terms of buying racetracks of late. He got knocked back for Queensland Raceway, and now he's been knocked back for Taupo in New Zealand as well. No, I think that's a shame. I don't know who's people have got their noses out of joint, but he certainly, if you have a look at what he's done at Highlands and have a look at what he's done at Hampton Downs, he certainly runs a good ship there. So I think that's a bit disappointing, especially Queensland. I mean, Queensland desperately needs some help because John Tetley really hasn't done anything much with that track for years and has made it very clear that he's not going to unless somebody else is prepared to put their hand in their pocket. He's not spending any money on the joint.
Well, I think there is a bit more to the Taupo story. I believe that he approached them about purchasing it about 4 or 5 years ago, prior to him purchasing Hampton Downs, and he was knocked back by the shareholders at that point. A bit like Queensland Raceways recently, all the indications were good that the shareholders of Bruce McLaren Motorsport Park were going to proceed with the sale to Celtic Motorsport, which is Tony's motorsport company. Yes, Paul, I will definitely. I've got Rodney. I'm fairly certain, actually, that Tony would have Rodney Jane's mobile number in his phone from his time in Carrera Cup. But I believe the issue with Taupo relates to the ownership of the circuit, but an understanding, as in a binding contract, about access to the circuit for the Taupo Car Club for a number of events per year at no cost. And there might have been a payout of some description that's necessitated if the circuit is sold to a new operator. And I would observe that drops the share price back to the shareholders by about 10 to 12%, I think, in terms of the total value of the share, which was not a drop in value that they were collectively willing to accept. So I'd say keep watching that space. I'd say Tony Quinn is nothing if not relentless. From the stuff we've read on Speed Cafe and on the racetalk.com, there'll be I think it was about 10 years worth of negotiations between Tony Quinn and John Tetley regarding Queensland Raceways. So it's a tough time to be a fixed operating venue for a sport where people aren't allowed to gather and you can't have spectators and you can't sell them food and they've got to stand 2 meters away from each other, and if they sneeze you got to lock the joint down. So Tony takes a very long-term view on things, and as we've seen, he does, when he makes acquisitions, they're very strategic. He spends the money in the right place, but the best thing he does is he puts the right people in charge and gets out of the way and lets them run it properly, which I would reflect if you're going to operate something like Queensland Raceways, both Queensland Raceway and Lakeside Park, effectively, for the benefit of a broader spectrum of the motorsport community, as opposed to the section of the community that John Tetley has clearly identified he feels the level of investment or lack thereof in the facility necessitates. You'll need someone who understands that business model, but also knows where the growth is. Call the park. Give Rodney a call. See what you can do out in the western suburbs of Melbourne.
Well, yes, I do know.
Rodney's taking lots of calls. Sorry.
Yeah, I do know that Sam Shaheen
from the
sort of did have discussions and did express some interest in the possibility of buying both Adelaide International Raceway and possibly even Calder from Rodney as well. But Rodney's made it clear that basically that as far as the track is not for sale, and we still don't know exactly what they're doing. I mean, there has been money spent there just recently, as we said on the show a couple of weeks ago. That they have spent money out there. They have done some resurfacing. They've certainly done some work at Adelaide International as well. So I don't know what the situation is there, but certainly it would be great to see Tony. I said to Tony a couple of years ago, in terms of like, why he was spending all this money in New Zealand and not in Australia. And he just said, look, he said they're just much easier people to deal with, and there's much more everything's much more straightforward over there. And at the time, he really wasn't showing any great interest in getting involved in things over here. But now, yeah, it'd be great to see him invest some money in a place
one
like
of the things
Calder.
about New Zealand is, yeah, their planning process involves a thing called resource consent, and apparently that was one of the things that originally hamstrung Hampton Downs in the initial stages of development. It took so long to get the sign off from the local government area and all the nearby residents and commercial agreements. If there's even one objection, nothing happens. But my understanding is once you do get a resource consent and it's very clear, a lot like the development application scenario that Wakefield Park is going through at the moment, you want to make sure that the bedrock of whatever facility you invest in has a solid foundation legally with the local, state and or federal governments as they apply, and that you're on very good terms with your surrounding landowners, because you need them to not cause trouble for you if your investment's going to be realised in the long term. And I'd say that's probably, yeah.
The interesting thing about Hampton Downs is we went over for the opening of Hampton Downs all the years ago, and it was really funny because it really was a grassroots thing. It was Tony Roberts and a whole bunch of people over there, a whole bunch of racers got together and said, look, Pukekohe can't last forever. It was like the Sandown scenario. Pukekohe can't last forever. We need another international racetrack. We need somewhere to race. The government aren't going to build. We all need to get together, pull together, and let's build this ourselves. And they did build, and it was funny on that weekend, as you were saying, it was amazing the number of politicians who turned up and said, what a wonderful thing. What do you guys need from us? We'd love to be involved in this, because, they had a big crowd there, and everyone was saying how wonderful it was, and everybody, it was like, we'd have been happy to have put some money into it. You must have a talk to us.
Politicians are only happy when they're taking credit for other people's work.
Yeah. Very true.
That's true. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, the state government announced the level crossing at Calder Park Drive to be replaced by a bridge, and also Holden Road crossing near Bob's Farm is to be closed permanently. So I don't know what that means because it sounds like in terms of getting in and out of Calder might be a.
It won't affect getting in and out of Calder, but it will affect anyone from west of Sydenham getting into the city, because you won't have to go through all the traffic through Keilor and what have you now. You'll just take the left-hand turn onto Calder Park Drive and be able to get onto the freeway a lot easier.
Yeah,
and going home, that'll be much more pleasant too.
Yeah.
Much better on the way home.
Well, let's hope that...
Dumplings are good, by the way.
Oh, that's good. So are you prepared to let us know where you got these dumplings from now? Are they worthy of a plug down?
No, I said, whenever it comes to new cuisine, I give it a good 8 to 12 hours before I give a thumbs up or thumbs down review.
Well, we look forward. Go to Dave Stillwell's Facebook page. Become a friend if you're not the one already.
Don't.
Follow him already.
Please don't.
And he will give you the tip as to where to go for the dumplings in the Sanchoy Bao and. In the future, but yeah. So anyway,
give a shout out to, I think it was Michaela who put the comment up earlier.
Yes,
yes. I'm very envious of the fact that every Chinese restaurant in the US has some form of General Cho, General Tso, General Chow's chicken. That's what I'm looking for. I only need one.
Well, as I said, there's a few places at Springvale that I know that do it. Although the one I'm thinking of, I think might have closed over the pandemic, over the lockdown. There was quite a big turnover. It was quite a shock of going back after being away there for quite some time and walking back and saying, I'll be able to go back and eat at my favourite restaurant again, and walk around the corner and found out that restaurant that had been there for sort of 15, 20 years or more suddenly was gone. But I tell you what, none of those shops that became empty were empty for very long. There are now pretty much they're all full again with other restaurants. So that's a good sign, I suppose. But yeah, there's a few General Tso chicken places that you can find there. You can find just about anything at Springvale. Clayton's another great. If you like a diversity of Asian foods, Clayton is fantastic because it's very Springvale is very heavily Vietnamese and Cantonese, whereas Clayton, you get you get Malaysian and Philippine and Szechuan and you get a whole range of different styles of Asian food. It's really great shopping over at Clayton. I found that by accident when we were over doing some stuff at the Dandenong or the Oakley Go Kart Club over there just down the road. Took a break to go up for lunch and great stuff over there.
Peking duck in
Mr.
Clayton
Ramsey.
at a fraction of the price that you'd pay in the city.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
quality.
I love a good
Yeah,
Peking duck
Peking duck.
pancake.
Yeah, great.
Mr. Ramsey, I'd just like to point out that I put a link in the comments, but it's come up as being posted by you instead of being posted by me. But the satellite image for Calder Park has been refreshed. So the recent drag event or drift event is showing the safety barriers in place, and looking at the track surface, it's very dark asphalt now, and the walls are lovely and white. So the work has been ongoing.
Oh, it's
Well, I
good.
think I actually spotted it in the
that good,
background. Have you if you've been watching any videos on YouTube recently, there's a number of ads by an Australian sports betting agency that shall remain nameless. They are quite humorous, and one of their bits is obviously the elite average games, tying into two Australian favourite pastimes, Olympics, and also taking the piss out of the Olympics. And one of the scenes shows an elite average athlete running with a pair of wheelie bins, and I'm looking at the video footage and going, that looks like a racetrack. It's up and over a hill. It's kind of. I reckon that's. Was it Jane Hill or Bob's Knob? At Calder Park. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get this.
Yeah, it's used a lot there's a lot of commercial, a lot of film production takes place there. Particularly like the Thunder inside the Thunderdome. Yeah, I think I said a while ago. Yeah, Kiss actually filmed a thing out there. And there's been quite a few things filmed out there because it's away from prying eyes. They can move into that infield section of the Thunderdome, and unless you're flying over and having a look down inside, nobody can really see what's going on in there. So it does get used quite a bit for particularly commercials, but also for other film projects as well. But what we want to see it used for is motorsport. I mean, we've had a few drift meetings there of late, which is good, and I think there's some more coming up, and hopefully some drag racing happening. We've got the Nationals are scheduled for February next year. Keep our fingers crossed, and we have October. I think it's October 2nd and 3rd, and this is something to put in for Stuart to put in the diary. October 2nd and 3rd, we should have another round of the Andra National Drag Racing Championships happening at Adelaide International Raceway. So,
oh wow, okay.
So hopefully that will take place. As I believe that everything's looking.
I'm calling
good at the
road
moment.
trip right now. I'm calling road trip on that one.
Yeah, on that one, I think it's certainly not the same as going. I was certainly flying up to.
It's only an 8-hour drive.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
In the car.
Not too. Yeah.
Although, mind you, I won't have the advantage of the last road trip over there in the lovely Ford Ute that was provided by Peter from Calder Park Drag Racing, which happened to look just the same as a divvy van unmarked. So you could sit there with the cruise control at 113 and people would just move out of the way. It was fabulous.
I love it.
2 thumbs up on that one.
Yeah, let's hope that happens. Anyway, let's. I think we're coming up to the end. Anybody got anything to say before we head off and go and do whatever it is?
Yeah, all our money is going to get spent by Black Magic again at 3:00 in the morning.
Oh, yes, that's an insider.
Product release, more cameras, lots of stuff.
more cameras. We'll talk about that's more of an office hours thing. But yes, if you're into film and television production, Blackmagic, and as was pointed out on a number of occasions, Australia, if there's one area where Australia is punching above its weight, forget about Olympics, forget about forget about every television and video production. We are just, in terms of equipment, Blackmagic, Atomos, VMix, what am I, Decimator, what am I forgetting? Bird Dog. Yeah, I mean these are the films and the television series and the live streams and everything that you see from all around the world. Pretty much chances are that most of the technology that's being brought to you by has been made somewhere, or at least managed from somewhere here in
Wi-Fi.
Australia. Wi-Fi, yeah.
Indeed.
There you go.
Until the Yanks pitch it off
Although
us. Until the Yanks pinch it off us.
Yeah, well, they haven't got some of the ones, but yeah, Blackmagic will be interesting. But once again, there's all this wonderful new equipment, and we can't afford any of it. So, but it'll be interesting to have
if anyone would like to sponsor us, ring him.
Yes. If anybody would like to sponsor us, by all means, ring me because right now we are absolutely flat broke. We have okay, everybody. We will see you next
advertising
week.
can be bought cheap.
Yes, at the moment, very
So
cheap.
can we.
Yes, we have. Everyone has a
For you,
price.
my friends, we make them a special price.
I'm not. I'm not easy, but I am cheap. Okay. We will see you all. We'll see you all next week after another edition. Now, as I said, hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be back in the studio on Tuesday night, and we will have. Not sure exactly what we'll have. We had some things organised before the last one, so I think we had Jordan Sidney organised to come in. So I'll have a word to Jordan, see if we can get him back in the studio for Tuesday night, and I believe we even have some live music coming in as well. So that's coming up. We'll record that. You can watch us produce the program live. You can watch us record it live on the Facebook page, and then you can watch the actual program, of course, next Thursday night at 9 o'clock on Channel 31 Melbourne and Geelong, and also, of course, on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel. By the way, if you're watching on the In Pit Lane, if you're watching tonight's show on the In Pit Lane YouTube channel, and you notice a big block of silence, YouTube's content ID algorithm has struck again, so we had to do a last minute quick edit to remove some music from the Audi story. But have a look at that Audi. Have a look at that Audi. That's an interesting little toy, an interesting thing. An onboard generator that just happens to be a surplus DTM 2-litre turbocharged engine. So, yeah.
Yeah, I take it. Dr. Ulrich Bez's successor was walking around Audi Sport headquarters and stubbed their toe on a pallet load of 2-litre 600 horsepower turbo, just going, "What is this? Go and put this in a thing. Take it away."
Yeah, everyone sort of expected that
some of those might end up in some LMP. Yeah, might end up in some Milan hypercars.
Well, that was the original thought. The original thought was that the Daytona hypercar, the LMDH that Audi are going to run, everyone assumed that would probably be the engine, but apparently it's not. So apparently it will be a V8. It will be a V8 engine, and it will probably be the same one that Porsche are running. So it's not going to. So apart from
most
bodywork,
likely the same engine that's in the Cayenne, the RSQ something, the Bentley Continental, in the Lamborghini Urus, in basically every VAG product with a front engine V8 in it, it'll probably be that one.
Probably be that one.
Who knew?
Yep. Well, and that's the advantage of these current regulations. I mean, you can take something, you can just look around your entire empire and go, yeah, that'd be suitable. We whack a couple of turbos on that, and we'll get a reliable 680 horsepower out of that. Pop a hybrid unit alongside of it to boost it up to about 780 for 800 horsepower, in short bursts, and away we go. It's that's why there's so many companies looking like they're going to get involved, and I believe there will be some major announcements made at Le Mans in a few weeks' time, probably on the Friday. Friday's always a huge day for media conferences, and the rumour going around is already that General Motors have got some time booked out at Le Mans to make a few announcements, which will probably be that the Cadillac brand will come back. They're already, of course, in the North American Sports Car Championship, but the word is that Cadillac will also possibly be a part of the World Endurance Championship as well. So. Yeah, all looking good for sports car racing at the moment. It's very exciting, and of course, as we said, this weekend the Spa 24-hour, that'll be lots of fun depending on what the weather does. And let's hope that they get through a whole 24 hours, unlike the Nürburgring, where they had about 6 or 8 hours worth of stuff. But anyway, we'll see you all next week. Thanks for joining us, and until then, we'll say good night. So, bye bye.
All right. See ya.